Come on now, dig into that red cabbage there. My kid brother, sensing difficulties, begins to whimper. The old man says, come on, tell us. What's the matter? I saw a scary movie. And my mother always had this thing, which she always said to my father, and it was, I told you we shouldn't see so many movies. You know, you heard this many times in your life. And he said, what was it? I said, well, it was about Africa. He said, what about Africa? Immediately thinking I saw a scene where a lion attacked a guy or something like that. And I said, well, it was about Africa, and they had all these bugs. And he said, bugs? What do you mean, bugs? Well, it was some kind of a funny bug. I said, funny bug? What kind of a funny bug? Now, come on, tell me. Well, it was some funny bug. It looked like a grasshopper or something. Yeah. My mother says, oh, come on now. You're okay. They're not going to come in here. Yeah. It's a bug called a locust or something. And it came and made a funny sound and ate everything up. And there must have been millions of them, and they were squeaking and everything. I thought, this locust. A scourge of locusts, huh? You saw a scourge of locusts in the movies? I said, yeah. Of course, you know, the kind of movies that my mother and father saw ran heavily to the Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers type, which was about as far from reality as you could conceivably get. I can remember Fred Astaire was always dancing on top of a grand piano wearing a high silk hat. And he had this cane that always blew up. You know, he'd hit it down, it would go pow, make firecrackers go. And Ginger Rogers was always wearing this suit, this dress, this long dress that had sparkles all over it. And I always wondered how come it didn't itch. And it was about as far away from reality as you could get. And that was the kind of movies they saw. The kind of movies that they were feeding the kids on Saturday afternoon was where it was really happening. I mean, it was 2 o'clock in the afternoon after they had the drawing for the bicycle. We saw the Scourge of Locusts. As far as I know, there has never once been a Scourge of Locusts in a Gene Kelly movie. Ever. To my knowledge. And you know, we were seeing, as kids, every Saturday afternoon, we are seeing these films about stuff which I'm sure that Bosley Crowther would have laughed at. For example, I will never forget the time that I saw John Hall. Now, John Hall had he had this hair that was plastered down with varnish. He had remember him? He had this hair, and he had this kind of like a short bikini-type bathing suit, and he had this gigantic chest. And he was with Dorothy Lamour, and her hair was also varnished. But the two of them hung on to a palm tree, I would say for upwards of 20 minutes, in the middle of a fantastic hurricane. And houses were flying past, and people and cows and the whole bit. Giant waves were coming up. I mean, and they did. My mother and father never saw that kind of film. They always saw films that had Jeffrey Lynn. Jeffrey Lynn was always coming in with a tennis racket and saying something to Priscilla Lane about playing tennis. And that was the kind of world they lived in. And Eugene Pallette was always in the movies that my mother and father saw. And Eugene Pallette was always saying things like, no daughter of mine is going to marry an artist. And the artist was always somebody like, Clark Gable. I mean, he was very unconvincing as an artist, but he was always an artist or a test pilot or something like that. And that's the kind of stuff my mother and father saw. You know, that was grown-up movies. And the kind of stuff that the kids saw was John Hall hanging onto a palm tree with this chick whose clothes kept flying off, with the houses whistling by. I remember, we were seeing real stuff because there are hurricanes out there, friends. And if you've never been caught in one, you can laugh. But if you've ever been caught in one, you'll know, because I was in Hurricane Donna. Was that one of the ones you were in? Well, I was in that one. You know where I was? I was in a cruiser, the Springfield, a missile cruiser between Haiti and Cuba. You know that strait in there? Let me tell you, that was a night I won't forget quick. Holy smokes. I mean it. Well, of course, this kind of stuff was never in the grown-up movies. That was always in kid movies. And so I saw the Scourge of Locusts, and I never forgot it. Weeks went by. Months went by. And now, from the time of 6 to the time of maybe 10 or 11, there has been 5 years go by, but I have never forgotten the scourge of locusts. And then one day, it was summer, and it was an ordinary summer day. Nothing particularly impressive about it. Wasn't very hot. Wasn't very cool. Was not ominous. It was just an ordinary summer day, and it's on the, it's on days, the unremarkable days that things happen. Just an ordinary day. I'm standing out on the front porch, and I'm about to go out and do something to hit Bruner or something. I'm on the front porch when suddenly I can see way down at the far end of the street. Must have been, way off down. We had a thing called the Big Swamp. And northern Indiana is filled with thousands and thousands of acres of unclaimed swampland. And this is where the lake used to be millions of years before, and it's left nothing but swamp and sand and skulls of snakes. And, yes, that's true. Used to be underwater. If you've ever lived in a part of the country that was underwater for a good part of its history, geologically speaking, the idea of various types of amphibian skulls constantly being dug up when you're looking for worms is as normal as breathing. And so, in this quiet afternoon, I see coming down the street, way down, a cloud, a black cloud. It was about a mile away. And the cloud extended up in the air. It looked like maybe 1,000 feet. It was like a rolling black cloud. Well, I looked down on the street there, and I could see it coming. And I had seen that cloud sometime before, somewhere before. I looked down, and you know how kids are, very matter-of-fact about things like this. Every kid who sees a movie at a certain age in his life fully expects to have that situation or thing that he saw in the movie occur to him. You do not ever think in terms of fantasy. This is the real thing. And I looked down the street and I saw this cloud. I watched it for about a minute. It was getting a little dark because the cloud was cutting off a lot of the light. I turned around, walked back through the living room, back through the dining room, into the kitchen. My mother's hanging over the sink, and I said, "Ma?" She says, "What?" I said, "Mom, the locusts are coming." She said, "What?" I said, "Ma, the locusts are coming." Like in the movie. They're on their way. They're coming. She says, "Will you stop bothering me? Can't you see I'm busy?" I said, "Okay." So out I went on the front porch to watch the locusts come. Well, let me tell you, I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that afternoon that I lived through and that everybody in the neighborhood lived through is today still talked about occasionally in newspaper stories. In fact, not more than a year and a half ago, I saw a reference to this afternoon in Time magazine. That's right. That it was one of the biggest attacks of locusts that had ever been seen in the Midwestern states since around the year 1838. Well, I could see them coming down the street, and as a kid, I always expected to have the locusts come because I saw them in a movie about Africa. Never, didn't surprise me. But if you've never seen a scourge of locusts, I will attempt to describe what it was like. First of all, the sound. Locusts are a flying animal, a flying creature. And to describe to you what a locust looks like, let me tell you this way. If you can imagine, you've all seen big grasshoppers. Now, there's several kinds of grasshoppers. There's the little green grasshopper. I'm talking about those big, dark brown kind. Yeah, you know the kind. Well, now, if you can take that grasshopper, multiply him roughly by double, give him a darker color, and give him a baleful look in the eye, an eye that is vaguely red, give him a wide wingspan, you have got a locust on the march. Now, there are two kinds of locusts. There's the 7-year locust, and the 17-year locust. And they reappear at those intervals. And where the 7-year locusts were, you'll find that every 7 years there is a small or large, depending on the year, depending on whether or not there's been drought or one thing or another, a little upsurge of locusts. The worst of all are the 17-year locust. And the 17-year locust has to have all the proper conditions exactly right. Now, it is not true that every 17 years there is a scourge of locusts. There is a smaller or a larger one, yes. But every 17 years, these locusts stir. And if the conditions have been right in the past 5 years, perhaps, maybe the past 10, you will see a genuine scourge. Well, these locusts hit northern Indiana like a fantastic tidal wave. The first thing that gets you is the sound. You can hear them coming from maybe 2 or 3 miles away, and they march in a front. They do not just suddenly appear like mosquitoes. They come in a body. They come in a great, vast cloud. It's as though somewhere the bugle has blown, and all the 17-year locusts come climbing out of their hole, and they fly to the orderly room. They fly to the parade ground. They all get together, and then they lay it on you. Apparently, there's something in the mind of this animal that says, singly, he'll be stepped on. He would never make it. But you put 2.5 billion locusts together, and stepping on them doesn't do you one bit of good. They just come out. It's like a drop of water. It's very difficult to drown in a drop, but ain't hard in the ocean. I mean, And so they came out of in fact, the west. I remember vaguely they came from the north and the west in a great rolling cloud. And the first thing you notice is the sound. You can hear it. It sounds like rain beating on a tin roof in the distance. But I mean a downpour beating, a kind of roar. Just it goes. You can hear that roar coming from out of the west. And then as it gets closer, you begin to hear individual sounds. The roar begins to break down into the sound of millions of locusts rubbing their hind legs or their wings together, whatever it is they do that makes that sound, that high-pitched sound. And then when they hit the house so hard. I am in the living room with my mother. She can't believe it. She's looking out of the window. The first thing she did was run and get the insect gun. We had a flit gun. I'm not kidding. She ran and says, "Get the flit gun quick." And here's my mother standing with the flit gun, and she gives me a fly swatter. and out of the darkness, out of the west, and out of the north came this fantastic crowd of bugs, just as wide as you could see. They stretched from the horizon to the horizon. Well, the minute they hit the house, you could hear them hit the house, literally, physically hit the house. It was like somebody had run along the side of our frame house with a stick, had just run along the side and run the stick up and down the slats of the frame house. It just went. Well, these guys were flying full tilt, and they hit this house like a wave, and they were hitting all the other houses in the neighborhood like just great waves, and you could hear people all around the neighborhood squeaking. You could hear muffled screams, and you could see windows with heads in it. You could see people pulling the shades down. I remember watching one lady across the street, Mrs. Anderson, was out in the back trying to take her laundry down, and running around with the locusts just swirling around her by the millions, and finally she just dropped the rope and into the house. I always remember that sight of her just dropping the rope, and the clothes poles fell down, and the locusts swarmed over all the pants and the underdrawers, and she just ran screaming into the house with about 40,000 locusts hanging on to her. And then that sound of the locusts eating, that is an indescribable sound. The locusts eat everything that is in their path. They chew the paint off houses. They actually eat clotheslines. They eat the shingles off the roofs of garages because they like the tar. They eat anything that isn't made of stone or solid, hard, old petrified wood. And the sound of the locust eating, it's a steady sort of a low, you know the sound of a meat grinder grinding